It's amazing when we're young how creative we are. It's just that things flow into everything that we do, and we can find a way to make everything fun. And I see that in my two boys all the time, how creative they are and how they can take the simplest thing, even if it's a cardboard box, and make it a pirate ship or make it into a castle, and they create this whole scene and it becomes alive. But yet, as adults, we seem to lose that, or we seem to stifle that so much that that creative energy lies dormant for maybe 10, 20, 30 years, or even more, maybe our lifetime. And it's really that essence that we need to rekindle to bring life back into ourselves. And that is why I'm so honored to have Laura Westman on the podcast today. Laura Westman is a credentialed coach, ontological leadership trainer, a musician and songwriter, an improviser, an author, co-host of West of Wonderland Podcast, host of the Creativity Broadcast on YouTube. She's a total fiend for all things magical and that feel like they are off limits in adulthood. She believes that for many of us, they actually crack the code to adulthood. She's infinitely curious about who you have to become to let your dreams become a reality. She believes everyone deserves to feel a passionate sense of creative joy and magic. Her philosophy is that creativity is how we connect with ourselves, the deepest kind of magic of all. I love this conversation with her, and there's so many insights into how creativity can literally make you come alive. It's amazing when you start to see this in your life, and I've seen this in my life, just the smallest little things that awaken that child within us. There's so much power in it, and I'm so honored to have her on the podcast today to share it with you. All right. Well, welcome, Laura Westman. I cannot wait to have this conversation. We connected a few weeks ago, and I just know this is going to be awesome. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So this is going to be such a great conversation because it's something that you hear a lot, and I don't think it's actually ever really discussed the depth of it and how much it impacts us and how much, maybe we resist it in our lives. And what we're talking about today is creativity. And so I want to start out because creativity can be one of those like faux pas things. And I think so many people say, well, I'm not creative. And then they stop there. But why do people resist creativity? Why do you think that occurs? And why are so many people just shutting it down before they can get started?
And it's so common. And I put myself in that camp too until a couple of years ago, because so I think we have personal reasons, we have cultural reasons. For me in my line of work as a professional leadership coach, you would hope that in the industry of supporting people to develop their leadership in their careers, that there would be a strong emphasis on creativity and creative thinking. But much like pretty much any industry, there's always going to be sometimes an explicit, sometimes an implicit, intense bias and push toward the things that are going to grow business and make more money.
Mhm.
And we will probably talk in today's conversation about why I actually think creativity does grow business and bring in more money in the first place. But we're kind of conditioned to believe that it doesn't, and that we have to be in this kind of more performative, serious conversation, more adult, more responsible, So I think anytime that I talk to somebody who has that thought of like, well, I'm not creative, or why should I spend my time on it? I first want to kind of like give that part of us a really big hug and just sit it down and be like, here's a popsicle. Most of this is not your fault. And that part of you that wants to play is totally valid. I also think it's kind of sad to me that we, as adult people, go to that place of labeling ourselves as creative or not creative, because I think every person is creative. You create anything, you are creative. I think when people say I'm not creative, what they're actually saying is, I don't think that I'm very artistic, or I don't think that what I do has artistic value or merit or is good or anything like that. But fortunately, creative energy doesn't need to be good or bad or artistic. Creative energy is about a flow, and it's about our connection to ourselves and our trust of ourselves, you know? So I think the in addition to like there's a lot of good reasons why we stop engaging with our creative self or why we think, oh, I'm not creative, so why should I care? There's all these cultural pieces, these ways that we're conditioned to value things or to be. But I think the most important thing really, Kelly, is to think instead of I'm not creative, actually to be in the question of, well, what does my creative energy bring me?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
that is a different lane to swim in.
I love that. And it's like the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask yourself. So just by
Totally.
asking yourself that question, you're going to start getting those creative juices flowing so that you can see a little bit more of that in your life. And I know you talked about like how a lot of times we think of creativity just as artistic work, but there's so much more to that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more of like where can we see creative energy for someone listening that's like maybe saying like, well, I can't paint, I don't know how to sing, where could my creative outlet be? Could you share some examples of like where do we see creativity in other ways?
Oh yeah, of course. So I have a video on my YouTube channel that is titled The Four Types of Creativity, basically. And I like to categorize them because I think we often think our thinking about our creativity tends to be limited to artistic pursuits. And I think that art and the practice of art and just having an art practice of something that you engage in is wonderful for many reasons. Like it's very regulating, it's very meditative. Plus, it's nice to be spending your time and energy in something that has nothing to do with your work, you know, or your merit as a person. Like it's purely just pleasure, you know? But I will also say that there are a lot of things that we, especially like very high functioning, you know, professional women, there's a lot of ways that we're already spending our time that are actually really creative. We just don't think about them in that way. Like we're not actually giving them the label. And I wish that we would, because I think we deserve a lot more credit for all of the ways that our creativity is functioning all the time, you know?
Mhm.
But even as simple as like if you think about the tasks that your job requires or all of the tasks that your daily life, if you're a parent, requires a lot of creativity, right? Your mind is working on so many different levels all the time. You're generating relationship while you're making dinner. You know, there's just like all of these places where we're actually creating quite a lot. And that creativity serves a really powerful purpose. And I think that when we actually slow down enough to acknowledge that that is part of our creativity and that's part of our essence and our like our spirit as people, we could give ourselves a lot more credit and actually find a lot more fun and pleasure in it.
Yeah, I want to go into that deeper because you know, big things like the essence and the spirit of the person, like that is such a huge part, but often so overshadowed by the doing, the
Hmm.
busy work. Can you talk about like what creativity has done for you in your own journey and personal transformation where you've brought creativity into your life? Like, how did it transform your life from maybe more of that doing busy to like now a deeper essence within yourself?
Yeah. So, like, wow, where to begin?
The
So
big
I think
question.
it is. It's why I love it so
Yeah.
much. Like, thanks for the space to be in the question.
Hmm.
So I'm going to kind of answer this backwards,
Hmm.
but so one of the things that I always like to say, whether I'm working with, you know, a C-suite client or whether I'm working with an artist coaching client, is that when we start to embrace our creative nature and we are doing it on a being level and not a doing level necessarily, we're actually letting ourselves just be more creative. That tends to have a very intense ripple effect that is not immediately, you know, packageable or labelable. I think I just made up a word.
I like
But
it.
it, yeah, it does have a really big impact. Like when you're starting to embrace your creativity as a leader in any space that you're in, what you're often doing is you're becoming more connected to the people that you're working with. You're becoming more receptive to their ideas and their leadership. And you're often likely going to be creating a lot more togetherness and collaboration, which makes people more relaxed, which makes people do better work and feel more of a sense of accomplishment. You know what I mean? So while there are practical strategies that can kind of change how things go, I do think it really is a being thing. And has us learning how to listen for, oh, what am I growing in these other people? Instead of like, let me focus on getting these things done. So it can be a little bit slow. And I actually think when it comes to my own journey with creativity, I really value the slowness that it takes
Mhm.
because I think that our creative side, oh, well, I'll just speak for my creative side. I have, and I think we all have like a very multifaceted creative genius. And that creative genius has a lot of skills and a lot of talents and a lot of ways to fit things together and move things around, and like I said before, mine has different modes as well. So there's like daydreaming mode and there's pleasure receiving, listening to music or singing mode. And then there's also like produce mode, where she can go into like beast mode and like churn out a lot of like those are all parts of our creative self. And when I started waking my creativity back up, I was full-time self-employed as a coach. I was working inside of a very high pressure ontological leadership training program. And I was living in Manhattan. And to my brain, I was like, I'm living the dream. Everything seemed to really be clicking together. But I was really tired. And I felt this really strong, like, disconnection between what my brain was able to force me to do and what my body was longing for.
Mhm.
And I started to get interested in bringing back my creativity as part of my life. I loved coaching people on their creativity, which is like a good clue to like what you actually really want to be doing sometimes. It's like a joke in the world of professional coaching is like the thing you're coaching is often the thing you just want to do,
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. And it's sort of hard to pinpoint like this is what occurred, like this happened when and this happened when, because as I shared with you when we met before, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease affecting the thyroid, but because it's autoimmune, it affects everything. And as I started getting more curious about what was going on with my throat, what was going on with my thyroid, what was going on with my throat chakra, I started to kind of connect some dots and I realized, oh, okay, so I grew up as a very creative person. I was always working on a project and churning this out and I was the lead in the play and the this that and the other, and when I was in my late teens, like right around the time you're making plans for college, I was losing my voice a lot. And I went to see a doctor. I went to an ENT and they said, "Oh, you've got, vocal nodules and you're going to need this kind of treatment and all this stuff." And I was honestly, Kelly, I was so devastated by that and the loss of the performing arts future that I had been planning for. I was so devastated. I don't think I heard the possibility of healing them. I think I just heard like your dream is over and you wrecked your body and it's your fault.
Mhm.
And that was probably one of the most painful things anyone could have said to me at the time. And so I just sort of took it and I just buried it. I was like, okay, march forward, do something else, But then, so there was like that pain that I kind of just took on and pretended was not there. Um, but there was also now this frankly, part of my identity that was just not accessible anymore. Like it was just out, like I think it's interesting in hindsight. I'm like, whoa, that's such an intense loss because this place where I always felt very at home on the stage was suddenly, I felt like I didn't belong there anymore.
Yeah.
And so I would always have these sort of like quiet, secret ways that I would keep it going. Like in college, I would wait for my roommates to leave and I would sing really loudly to a playlist, or I remember after college, I would like wait for everyone to leave for work and then I would sing in the shower really loud for like an hour just to not be heard by anyone and just like really enjoy it, but it felt like something I had to hide or be, very secretive about.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm glad. I mean, it's interesting to talk about now because so much of waking it back up was like actually being very soft and tender and loving because I had this passion, but it was kind of held inside of these locked boxes, that are painful, like both emotionally and physically painful, you know? And so when I think everything that I've created about creativity or written or the places where I coach, the the thing that's most important to me is that people really just are interested in like softening toward that part of themselves because I think our creative self, mine, like I said, she has a lot of different modes she can go into, but like the purest version of her is like, I don't know, 7 years old. Like she's little, and she's so imaginative and vibrant and she has so many ideas. And you can't you can't like point a finger at a literal 7-year-old and be like, produce something, you idiot. Like but we're so used to taking that tack with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I think when we really can just quiet down and treat that part of us either like a kid or like a little animal, like maybe it's a new kitten and you just need to give it a lot of space and nourishment and kind of let it lead the way, let it show you where it would like to emerge. Like that's a very different way to be with ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's huge. And it's just that, speaking to the child within you, I mean, there's so many of us have disconnected from that child for so long that you literally forget who you used to be and what you used to enjoy. And it's like you can, look back at photos and be like, who was I at that time? And you're talking about your 7-year-old self. It's like such an endearing way to like look at yourself and just realize that like there's so much underneath all these layers of stuff that I've accumulated in my life and all these,
Mhm.
things that maybe the messages I've taken and all this stuff, but you're still in there. And that's such a
Mhm.
huge part to realize that like the most purest form of you is still there. It's just kind of getting back to that person. So
Yeah.
beyond that softening and having compassion and starting to connect with yourself, was there anything else that allowed you to get more to that creative child within yourself?
Yeah. One thing that really sticks out is I started wanting to play music at home. And so I bought myself a ukulele because it was a small instrument. And I was just like, you know, that's something I could wrap my head around, like having in my space and starting with that. And I think that the more I started doing it, the more I wanted to do it. And there was one Christmas when my then boyfriend, now husband, bought me an electronic keyboard. And I grew up playing piano, so this was like a big one for me. And it was so sweet. He, wrapped every part differently and kind of hid the pieces around the it was a really cute
Cool.
scavenger hunt that had me like crying a lot, but like having someone else around me to like kind of nurture that was
Mhm.
so wonderful because it wasn't just me in that question of like, can I do this again? Someone else was like, it's totally cool. Let me help,
Yeah.
which is, I think, really powerful. And I will say also, I really missed my voice. I missed singing. And so when I started to bring it back, I found myself in need of a lot of like validation and care and support, but I think I also kind of knew that the world doesn't value this the way that I value this. That's totally okay because it doesn't belong to the world, it belongs to me. And so the more I can really keep my relationship with it very pure and appreciative, the better. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that just
Yeah.
like holding on to that quote, it doesn't belong to the world, it belongs to me. And I'm like, oh gosh, that is a good one because that's it. I mean, we get so bogged up in like, well, what will people think or what's expected of me or all the
Mhm.
messages that can really crowd that, but it doesn't matter. Like if you validate yourself and you know what you want, you have that deep knowing, that's all that matters.
Mhm.
That's such a huge lesson, but it can be really challenging when you've been stuck in a cycle of depending on the world to tell you that it's right for you. And
Totally.
that's really, I mean, that's like such a good quote to say, it doesn't belong to the world, it belongs to me. And like anchoring in your own power, your own voice, like literally and figuratively, like so powerful there.
Wow,
And
I can't believe that fell out of my mouth. It makes me think too of it's just some of the relationship to like the high achieving like part of me that I think really created my autoimmune disease. Because when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, first of all, I didn't know I had any problem. I
Mhm.
didn't know until my thyroid numbers were off and they were like, oh, you have hypothyroidism. And I was like, I do, like
Yeah.
that's how disconnected I really was. But one of the primary symptoms during that time was definitely brain fog.
Hmm.
And I feel like, tell me what you think about this because you're the professional on this end, but like brain fog is one of those things that I think if you haven't experienced it, it's really hard to understand or like convey to other people the impact that brain fog can have. And the more that I started really doing the kind of inner emotional spiritual work, in addition to the help from my naturopathic doctor, kicking my thyroid into, you know, gear, I mean, that sort of diminishes what a long process it's been. I don't mean it was just like, oh, I took a pill and everything was fine, because it's definitely not what it's been like. But I think the thing that was very interesting to me was how much of it felt like, oh, I've got to kind of quietly take my power back. I've given it away. That's why I have no voice, literally or figuratively. It's just been given away.
Yeah.
And that experience of actually wanting to take it back and bring it back,
Mhm.
it's powerful, it's terrifying, it's like requiring a lot of healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as you were speaking, I don't know if you read Heal Your Body by Louise Hayes?
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so like if anyone's listening to this and you have something going on, you're like, what is going on? Like it really talks about that emotional connection to physical ailments. And there's a
Hmm.
huge connection with that. So I appreciate you sharing your story of, the challenges of Hashimoto's, but also like losing your voice figuratively and literally, and how that all interplays. And that I think is just such a huge thing that we need to really share out in the world now, because there's so many of us who maybe have physical ailments and you think you're just like grinding trying to figure it out, but
Hmm.
it's that power that you have within yourself to heal yourself. Like your body is always trying to heal, but if we meet it with a resistance of like quieting ourselves or betraying ourselves or forcing it to do things it doesn't want to do, that's when we're really going to get into that survival mode and we can't naturally heal in the way that we want to heal. So I appreciate you sharing your journey, because I hope that becomes inspirational to somebody who maybe is listening and is like, oh, there's another way. There's another way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and I think just in line with that too, um, one of the things I really appreciate about Louise Hay's book about You Can Heal Your Life is, you know, whether or not you have beliefs around like the metaphysical world,
Mhm.
there is an undeniable truth that our bodies talk to us and that our bodies are really smart.
Mhm.
And so actually when things go wrong, quote unquote, in our bodies, because of our culture and also because it's a very male dominated medical field, like I think women in particular, when things happen in our bodies, we're like, oh, it's an inconvenience because I have
Mhm.
all these other things to do, you know?
True.
But what I keep learning over and over is that my female body is so smart. It's smarter than my brain most of the time. And it's cyclical. These things that like I find annoying, the more I learn about my menstrual cycle, I'm like, oh my God, I have different superpowers every 4 weeks. Like, that's crazy.
Yep.
Like,
Mhm.
that's incredible. And when we actually slow down enough to ask ourselves, like my throat, like actually asking my thyroid, like, what message do you have for me? What's going on? What's going on? I think I spent a year of my life every day on purpose asking my throat, what message do you have? What message do you have? What message do you have? And it was very slow and it was beautiful because so much of it was just actually on purpose taking the time to ask because we just don't.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's just that like it's an inconvenience. No, this is your body communicating with you. Like it is advocating for you. It is protecting
Yeah.
you. It is doing everything it can to let you know. And the thing is, we ignore it for so long that it gets to the point it has to scream it at you. And that's when
Uh-huh.
we see the diseases and conditions happen, because you've ignored the little signs so long that it has no other choice but to make it well known. And
Hmm.
that is, I mean, it's such a tremendous point there, and something that I really hope, anyone listening is like, listen to your body. You have to. Your body is there first. It's there. Your mind is trying to keep up with what the body knows. The body
That's
is so
right.
intelligent, and we cannot be in a place where, I mean, I was in this place for so long. I struggled with chronic back pain for many years and had a very similar experience. I did all the mechanical things, did all the things that I thought I should do, but it was
Hmm.
really an emotional thing I was holding on to for so long. And it was only when I recognized that and started doing my own healing that it released itself. And
Wow.
don't deal with that anymore. But I mean, it was many years in my 20s, early 30s that I dealt with that too. And I had no idea how intelligent my body was because the whole time I was hating on my body and saying,
Mhm.
why are you putting me through this? Why do I have chronic back pain? So this is such a powerful message because our body is 100% on our side. It is advocating for us. It wants us to feel better and be better. And it just is trying to communicate with you. So I love that you're asking your throat for what it wanted to tell you, and
Mm,
that brought you to that place.
thank
And
you.
yeah, and like as you did that, so when you started like healing in the way, how did that change as far as like the way you perceived life, the way you started moving forward, the way maybe creativity started coming back to you, and the way you started to maybe open up your soul a little bit more to the things that are meaningful?
Yeah, it's complex. Like I said, creative energy flows. Alana Fairchild has this great quote. She says, "The nature of creative energy is that it flows in all directions." It's one of its superpowers. So when you start to kind of open it in one area, it's going to move other things in other places. We just don't always know. Like it almost has its own intelligence to it. And one of the things that started happening was, like I said before, the more I started doing it, the more I wanted to do it, which is kind of awesome,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And I think for a long time, I was trying to like wedge it in because, like I said, I had a very busy, high pressure professional life. And, I think a lot of people can probably relate to this where like the people who are mentoring you in your field have kind of like, you know, they have made it work for themselves in the industry. And so their advice is going to be coming from the standpoint of this is how it is, this is how you can make it work. But I kept feeling like something was off about it. And I didn't know what that was. And I was like, is it generational? Is it this? Am I too sensitive? Bleh. Like, what is it? And meanwhile, I'm trying to find times, like, even at the end of the day before I go to bed, to like let that, lovely, quiet, contemplative, sensitive, creative 7-year-old within me have a little time, even if it's just playing piano alone or listening to songs and just sort of getting lost in them, like actually finding time for that. Because I think that part of me is like probably just sources me. It's almost like me being alone with myself. And it's like the only place I know how to do that at that time. And it's so magical to just
Mhm.
like be in your own company in that way. Like it's really cool.
Mhm.
And I think that the more I started like letting that part of me be seen a little bit at a time, like let my husband see it, share more about that, find some friends who kind of feel like that they get that vibe, spending more time with her myself, I started to just have very little tolerance for spaces where she made no sense. And that was a little bit of a problem because, like I said, my professional life was like, "Rah," you know, but I started thinking creatively, I was like, okay, there's got to be a way to design my professional world to make sense and to feel integrated. There's got to be a way. And so I started where I could, which was like, okay, my new coaching clients are going to be creative people. I'm just going to go in that direction. And so that brought my stress level down. And it also meant that I was kind of obsessed with my clients, because they're like cool and creative and interesting. So that was wonderful change. And then I think I just started like along that line of thinking I mentioned before about like, I'm getting this advice. It seems well intentioned, but something's off for me. Like it's not really working. I really started thinking about, and some of this is specific to being self-employed, but I think any person in charge of their career needs to be thinking this way of like, so I'm in this particular industry. Here's the experience I have. Here's the direction people tend to go. But if I stop and actually look at what I value, and if I can become extremely clear about what my values are, then let me look at the things that don't fit with that and see what kind of changes that I want to make. And something happened when I started doing that where my trust in myself just skyrocketed because I suddenly had permission to just invent new stuff and create new things instead of kind of following what I saw other people doing, which, like I said, had been making me sick and miserable. That sucks, especially in an industry that's supposed to be about helping people.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. That anchoring into yourself and trusting yourself and just listening to that inner voice, like it's so profound because we all have that guidance, but we've
Hmm.
shut it down for so long, or you've just like taken the authority of somebody else that we like literally disregard our own authority for so long.
Hmm.
And it's huge, but like so many of us relinquish that power we have within ourselves.
And
And
it's
then we think
huge
there's
for our
no other way.
generation. Yeah, it's
Yes.
like it's so different. It's so different than the generation before. It's very
Mhm.
different than the shape it's taking with the generation coming up. I
Yeah.
think the just like the place where I think most of our parents were parenting from, you know, like I love my parents. I don't have any complaints about them, but they missed this thing that, you know, most
Yeah.
people missed during that time,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
that kind of like that ability to trust you growing up.
Yeah, 100%. And also I think that goes hand in hand with like connecting with your emotions. And it's like
Hmm.
if you're very disconnected from the emotional part of yourself for any reason, it can be really challenging to know what's valid and what's not. And so then
Yeah.
seek out that validation outside of yourself because you're not validating your own experience of it.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a
Yeah.
big trap. And then you seek it out even more. And if you're a high achiever, that becomes that dopamine fix when someone says, hey, good job. Hey, I'll promote you. Hey, here's an extra, so amount of money in your paycheck. Like
Yeah.
those things become very addictive and then can really pull us out of our own inner authority.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Yeah. I mean, that thing that you just said is so powerful. And I feel like it there's this gold nugget on the inside of it that I just want to highlight and talk about one more time, which is like we all do have the power to slow down our reactions and notice when we're looking somewhere else for validation and practice giving it to ourselves. It's really hard at first. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna lie. I had this um I don't know when I don't think it was before I had made some really big business changes, but I was like, I think I'm having an anxiety attack. And I remember because I was in the shower and I was like about to move on from something that felt really hard to move on from. Like all of my inner people pleasing tendencies were like on fire. It was so hard to say, no, I'm leaving. But I was like battling myself. I could feel part of me being like, it doesn't matter. And part of me was like, it matters what they think. And there was just this war. And I just like couldn't, you know? But then I had this thought where I was like, does their opinion of me matter more than mine?
Mhm.
Uh-oh. And I literally, Kelly, I kid you not, I imagined that I was Professor Dumbledore and I pulled out from my imagination a deluminator like he gives
Mhm.
to, yeah, okay. So I pulled
Yeah.
out the deluminator, which, will take the light back from light fixtures and hold light and then give it back. And I stood there in the shower pretending to take my approval back from all of the places where I was giving it. And I just, I do it from time to time now, like as a
I love
practice.
it.
Yes. I
I
mean,
love
use it
that
anytime.
visualization.
Yeah.
Yes, that's such a good visualization, but such a huge like tool to have when you're feeling
Yeah.
those. I mean, like when you describe that like inner battle, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there so many
Yeah.
times. And I'm sure for people listening, it's like, oh yeah, like you know that, but then it's like, which one's gonna win out, and you
Yeah.
don't know. And you're like, but having that, like, just what you said, like, does their opinion matter than my own opinion of myself? Like that's huge. Like that
Yeah.
is so big. And just to realize that, when you can step back and you could see yourself from that perspective, I think that that's also huge, having that clarity to realize, oh, this is what's going on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next step for how do I handle this?
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely huge. But I love that visualization. That's so good.
It's kind of great, isn't it?
It
It's
really
sort of
is.
like it's kind of the consequence of so the podcast that I have with my coaching BFF is called West of Wonderland, and we talk a lot about we're kind of just like creating a lot of terrain in the overlap between personal development work and magical media, so it's Wizarding World and Disney and all the stories we love and, that kind of thing. And my friend Bay, who I do the podcast with, she's a coach. She's been coaching as long as I have, but it's impossible to spend time with Bay and not become re-obsessed with the Harry Potter books. Like it's just impossible. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I kind of fell in love with a lot of stuff over the last few years simply by virtue of working on that with her,
Yeah. It's
It's pretty
amazing.
awesome.
Like
Yeah.
those stories, like that, Disney and all those like stories play on our subconscious mind. So it's so much easier for our brains to relate to stories like that. So by
Hmm.
having that in yourself and being to anchor into something that's so relatable, that there's so much power into that. And like just going through that journey and that's really where that neuroplasticity comes in. You can change your brain by anchoring into something that is meaningful to you. And so for you, it was that like Harry Potter reference. And it's like for anyone, if you hear a story that you can really relate to, like use it
Yeah.
to catapult you into a place where you want to go. So I love that.
I'm so glad. I mean, it's funny because I think a lot of adult women need it. We
Hmm.
are desperate for a place where we can relax and play again. And
Yeah.
also, I think a lot of us are really desperate to feel like our story matters and that we matter and that the things that we go through are going to have a point. And so, if we don't have stories to anchor into and characters to love and identify with, what do we have? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
come
That's
on.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so right. It's very challenging for many of us because we're so stuck in that autopilot to come down off of that or like to, even like a society, it's also like viewed almost sometimes as childish if you're playing, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous, like but it's like that it's not. This is essential. We were designed to play and explore. Like this is how we were set up. And it's like you spend time with any child, you see it, like how natural that is to come up with these scenarios like I mean it's amazing but like it is that part of like for me play was very foreign to me until I had kids and I'm like oh how do I do this again it's been like
Uh-huh.
30 some years since I've done this and it almost you have to retrain yourself to just be free and how to be creative and how to like just get tap into that world but like it's once you do it feels so liberating to be
Oh
there
yeah,
again like
100%. I mean, like back to where we started this conversation about like, oh,
yeah.
if you think you're not creative,
Mhm.
first of all, if you have children, you are very creative. I don't care what
Mhm.
anybody says.
So true.
Secondly, one place to play that I think is really fun is when it comes to meal prep.
Mhm.
Like we tend to think about meal prep as like, okay, it's this thing that we just have to like figure out, especially if you have a large family, like you just got to plan stuff and people have to eat. But what if you take like a little bit of extra time this week and either add something fancy or just go a little bit more into the realm of like creativity or desire when it comes to one of your meals and just see what happens. So
Yes.
much of, I think, awakening our creativity is about like try a little something, like be a little bit like devious, like a little bit, and
Yeah.
then just watch the change because it is
Mhm.
different when you let yourself do that. You will feel different. It's more satisfying, when you get to follow little creative impulses. And
Mhm.
like, it's also often really easy and natural to share it, which creates a lot of joy and
Yeah.
happiness. And I don't know, to me, that's kind of the point of being alive.
100%. Like as
Yeah.
you're speaking, I'm like, my husband did that for a long time. On like Halloween, he would create breadsticks and like make them into like fingers with blood on them, but it'd be like
So cute.
sauce. And then
Yeah.
he made like cow tongues, but it was really just like fresh mozzarella and like peppers with like, drizzle on it. But it was fun. And it was just like, yeah, you're so right. It's just something to anchor into and just to get started, like doing something. But it made it a whole new meal. Like we still
Hmm.
call peppers with fresh mozzarella and like balsamic drizzle cow tongues like
Yeah.
after that. So it's fun just like reintegrating fun into your life. It's a game changer and
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
And
it is a game changer. And I also think that, I mean, tell me what you think about this, but So I'm not a parent.
Mhm.
I have a lot of very close friends who are parents.
Mhm.
And the one of the things that I have observed in a lot of my parent friends and clients is this sort of like undercurrent of like, the tension of like, I love my life as a parent and I'm obviously very committed to it. And there's like a part of me that lived before that I miss,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And for a lot of my friends, because this is the, place that I grew up in, that part of them is a performer or an actor or a singer, or they're in the marching band, or they've got some like really intense skill and talent that used to take up a lot of their life and be part of their identity. And,
Mhm.
adult life requires we spend our time differently. I think we waste our time when we blame ourselves for giving up our creative passion. Like I would not,
Yeah.
don't even try. Like don't go there anymore. But I know that people do miss being able to like go to the band room and just play music for an hour and like not think about anything, or they miss how it felt to be like the first chair of something. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think most adults miss that. And while we can't go back in time, I do think there's a lot of power to remembering that that part of you is totally still there,
Yeah, I
you
totally
know?
agree. Yeah, and I can totally relate to that because I think so many times as a parent we think that like, okay, it's all about the kids. And like, your life does revolve around your children, but you get so focused on what they're accomplishing, what they're doing that it's very easy to lose yourself in the mix and to be like, okay, like what am I going to accomplish? What's my purpose? What am I going to do? And it's like that was a challenge for me with children is like navigating that like spending the energy on them, but also like, okay, what can I do for myself? And like triathlons was something that I did before I had kids. Spent a
Oh
lot of
my
time doing
gosh.
that. Like I love triathlons, like half marathons, I would train a lot and be very active. I had children and that has slowed down significantly. But after I had my first son, I'm like, you know what? I'm doing a triathlon. I'm doing it because for me, I'm like, you know what? For him to see me do this, even though my time was significantly slower, it didn't matter. Like, I'm like, I'm going to do something. He's going to see me accomplish that because I think it's meaningful to anchor into like what's meaningful for you at every stage and have that purpose even as a parent. I think we can easily get lost in thinking that like our children have to be like priority, invest all our energy into that. If we don't invest
Mhm.
into ourselves, we're really just teaching our kids that it's you don't have to invest in yourself. Just relinquish your own energy all the time. And that's not a good lesson for your kids either.
Oh, it's so true. It's so powerful. I do
Yeah.
feel like one of the things I wish I could say to every parent is like, your kid is better off when you're also fulfilled,
100%.
like I think
Hmm.
that's really, really true. And,
Yeah.
I think, for anybody listening to this who might be like, okay, cool, but like practically speaking, like how do I start doing something like that again? Is it okay if I share my free
Yeah.
resource?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I made this really cool thing. It's called Uncover Your Creative Magic.
Mhm.
And it is like, it's a guide and you kind of use it like a treasure map.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Fun.
it's from my creative magic, it's like kind of unusual, I think, when it comes to like a cool free PDF thing. But like the thing about it that I like so much is that it's a very like loving, calm, compassionate step by step asking you to like do a little bit of reflection about like how does it feel right now? And if we go into your past, what are some of the creative treasures from your past that are important to you? So that guide is totally free and it's at laurawestman.com/uncover for uncover your creative magic.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'll put in the show notes too. And one thing I want to go into because I just want to there's one thing I want to definitely make sure we cover because I think this is something we all experience is like, writer's block, but it could be for any
Oh
creative
yeah.
thing where you're like, you want to so badly create something and then you go to do it and you're like, I've got nothing. Like, like maybe it's a podcast episode, maybe it's a piece of art or a poem you want to write, and you go to do it and you're just like sitting there feeling like you don't know even where to begin. What has worked for you to like move past some of those blocks that maybe some of us experience? And then, for someone who maybe creativity is a kind of a new thing for them, this could be big on like just them being like, okay, forget it. I'm not going to do this. How do you move past that so that way you can get through those hurdles and continue to open up and expand that?
It's such a great question. Such a great question. Especially because our creative process has many different stages, and there are some stages where we need the flow to be happening, like when you sit down to create a podcast, for example, we've got to be in flow, right? Or there's nothing to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
And then sometimes, you're in like where I am with my album right now is a lot of like producing it, so there's precision needed and attention and a lot of focus. And it's a very intense energy that does not feel the same as like just the flowy, let's experiment, whatever, whatever. So I think when you're encountering something like writer's block or you sit down to work on something and you're like, I got nothing, I think it's a great moment to pause and get connected to your body again.
Mm-hmm.
Because often what we're doing, and just as you're listening to this, think about what your version of this is, because it might not look exactly the same as what I'm about to say, but we all have some version of this where we have an idea, we get excited about it, we work ourselves up. Sometimes we go way off in our minds to fantasy land about like how amazing it's going to be or how amazing we're going to be or the accolades that we will get, blah, 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 blah. We just like go down this hallway in our brain, and then we work ourselves up and then we sit down to work on it and we're like deer in headlights. So that's a moment to, number one, get back into your body, whatever it takes, whether it's like breathing or exercise or dance or something, just to kind of like quiet the mind gremlins. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you're back into your body, do a little bit of investigating to name those mind gremlins. Are they like, we got to get this exactly perfect out the gate? Like, what's actually going on there that has that blank page feel so intimidating? And sometimes it is straight up like, oh, I just have really high hopes and expectations and I don't want to, not meet them. Well, guess what? The only way that you will on purpose 100% not meet any expectations is by not actually making anything. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So
And you
true.
know what's awesome about like writing or anything is it gets refined. It's not supposed to be the perfect, shiny, finished product at the beginning. It's really not. I think that's what's so amazing about taking on creative projects too, is that like the intention with which you approach it is so powerful. Because if all you want is to write for a creative outlet, what's so great, it doesn't matter what you write about. And it doesn't matter if it's any good because you're just writing for an
Mm-hmm.
outlet.
Yeah.
And that's a very pure intention. And, if you're like me and you're making music and you're like, putting something together and you have a specific intention for it, there's a time to bring out that part of you that is critical
Mm-hmm.
in service of making it complete.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the beginning. The beginning is, and this is something I say in my course in Creative Clear Out, is your bad art is better than no art.
Mm-hmm.
Like across the board, I believe that that is true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. All great suggestions because that's such a thing that so many of us, I mean, if you're doing anything, entrepreneur, whatever you're doing, like you are experiencing that at some point in your life. So like
Mhm.
all great suggestions. And like the one that I really liked is like that critical energy is not for the beginning. I
Yeah.
love that. Like, even if you just plan out here, I'll do critical energy in 3 days, it's like, then it's like you can release that from the beginning. So I love that because I find that that's a lot of like that sticking point is like, the inner talk of like, I'm not good enough. It's not good enough. Like, I don't, I don't even know how to do this or like all those stories that we tell ourselves keep us stuck. So I love that you can like literally bank that for another time.
Yeah,
Like
just be like, thank you, not
that,
yet. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like, have a snack. I'll see you in a couple hours. Like,
that's it.
and it's crazy how helpful this is too as an entrepreneur, because just as an example, I've got some stuff coming out in July, and it's so easy for me to slip into like how many people are opening my emails and like, are the posts getting any
Mhm.
attraction? But it's like
Yeah.
crazy. But
Yep.
the deal I made with myself for this period of time is like it's just a practice of putting stuff out there. And then like later I can look at what worked and what didn't work, but I can't do it along the way. It's going to be too much of that, getting myself down and over evaluating and whatever.
Yeah.
Like I literally have been like, okay, Laura, like the right now reminding people you have something going on is better than any of it being good. Like that's
Yeah.
a really different thing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. It's
know?
just like go easy on yourself, It's
Yeah.
like Yeah, and I think it is a constant reminder, especially if you are like that high achieving person, that is most of many people that listen to this. Like, give yourself some grace. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, just put it out there. Like,
Yeah.
I love it's
And
such a
enjoy it. Like
yeah.
that's the other thing. And in my book, where I write a lot about like the reawakening of my voice and what I was doing to kind of bring it back and keep it, one of the things that well, I don't feel weird about it anymore because it's very effective, but it's like kind of weird to tell people about. But like one of the things that I would do was record myself singing different things and just like listen to it all the time and just listen because the fact that I was doing that again meant so much to me. It didn't matter if it was good. And I did end up really learning to love it,
Yeah.
which is a cool byproduct, But the fact that we are being creative should be the most important thing. It should be the most valuable thing,
Mhm.
because there have been times in our lives when we weren't anymore. So I think it should be celebrated that you are, even if it's like not very good.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly it. And like, I love how you suggest that recording in your own voice because there's something so powerful about hearing messages or hearing anything in your own voice that
Yeah.
literally with your brain chemistry, that makes a huge difference versus hearing it in someone else's voice. So like that actually has a very scientific principle of like
Does
working.
it
So
really?
it does, yes. Like when you hear it in your voice, it's much more powerful for your mind because it's like you hear your voice all the time. So it's like when you have something that's very affirming coming from your own voice, it's like your brain interprets that as a very deep-seated message of like, oh, this is my truth. So there's a lot
Wow.
of like power in doing that. So like even if for someone if affirmations is your thing, like literally you can record affirmations and listen back to yourself or telling yourself a story that is really empowering, like record yourself doing it and listen to yourself because and like I've recorded meditations and everything. Like I'll listen to my own meditations because it just has it just impacts you when it's your own voice you're listening to.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I didn't know
Mhm.
there was like an actual scientific
Yeah.
reason why that works. Because I've told people this before too, that one of the things that made a really big difference in helping me move on from, the environment that wasn't really good for me.
Mhm.
I'd started our podcast around that time, and I just felt like when I heard myself on the podcast, I was like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not an idiot. Like I know stuff, and
Huh?
it was like listening to that over and over gave me the
Yeah.
confidence to actually step out.
That's it. Yes, exactly. It's like almost your personal proof that you are capable. Like you're
Yeah,
giving it to yourself. And your
your
brain
personal
loves proof. That's it. It
yes, it's
loves proof.
true.
It will seek it out either way. If you think you're good, it'll find a reason why you're good. If you think you're not good, it'll find a reason why you're not good. It loves proof. So why not give it the good proof that, hey, you're doing it, you're putting yourself out there. It's like Brene Brown talks about that, like you're in the arena, like no one
Hmm.
can judge you if they're not in the arena. Even if it's ugly in the arena, you're in it, you're doing it. So that's where you want to be. And like, I just love that. And like that creative energy, if you're in the arena, even if you don't think it's good, you're there, you're doing it. So celebrate that. There's huge benefits to doing that. So this has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could go on forever, but thank you so much for sharing your guide. I will make sure that's in the show notes for anyone who wants to check that out and, start getting your creative energy going and definitely connect with Laura. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you. I loved it too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for someone listening, like take this as a nudge from the universe, like start doing something creative. Like maybe it is that food prep, maybe
Hmm.
it is just coloring, like, get a coloring book and start coloring, like whatever it is for
Oh,
you.
coloring is the best.
It is. I know
Yeah.
it's fun. Like I do with my kids, like there is something just something so therapeutic about it. So even if it's that, do it. If it's a doodle, like just find something creative and start your first step forward to doing that because it's really where it's about. And you'll start getting that evidence of how amazing that is.
Mhm.
Exploring that creative energy. So thank you so much. And again, thank you everyone who's joined us today. Really appreciate your energy being here and tuning in today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Rewiring Health. I hope you found our conversation both enlightening and empowering. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Rewiring Health so that you never miss an update. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you could take a moment to rate and review the show, it would mean the world to me and help others discover the power that we all have within us to create change and create the life that we truly, truly desire. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with me and sharing the energy of the show.